My next guest company just released a report on remote work and the U.S. labor market over the last year. Upwork found 36% of the American workforce performed freelance work in 2020, and more than half of the workers who are new to remote work due to the pandemic are now considering freelancing in the future. Joining us now for more, Upwork CEO and President Hayden Brown, the latest guest in our work shifting conversation. So Hayden, do you think the CEO of Shopify or Netflix, who's going to be on the right and the wrong side of history?
Thanks for having me, Emily. I'm definitely with Toby from Shopify on this one, because I think what companies and talent found last year was this huge ability to control their work lives to a greater degree when they were working remotely. You know, they lost control with a lot of things from the pandemic, but what they gained was, on the freelancer side, a lot of autonomy in when, where, and for whom they're working. And companies are starting to figure out that with remote work, do critical things for their businesses. And that is something that they desperately need, and they do not want to go back to the old ways of working. They really need this talent working for them going forward.
So, in terms of your report, what are you finding trends in terms of trends that surprised you?
I think, we were actually not that surprised by how well remote work is working for so many folks. I think what's surprising is a lot of the clients are just starting, a lot of businesses are really just starting to figure out how well this can work for them. And this is where I think the next year, 2 years are going to be so eye-opening for companies, because the conversation over the past year has been about where. The conversation over the next year is going to be about who and how. And I think that's where so many companies are going to be really transforming their workplaces and their work practices to take full advantage of the skills that they gained over the pandemic in terms of remote work. So even as they reopen offices, and even as they go back into those offices, they can still take advantage of so many of those skills to tap into talent pools that are not necessarily in those offices, that those are distributed teams, remote teams of both employees and independent talent. And I think that is where so much of the exciting changes in the work landscape are going to be going forward. And I think a lot of the data in the report hints at those benefits that both companies and employees and independent talent are all seeing across the spectrum of the work world.
So talk to us about the rise in freelance work. Is that something that you expect to keep up this year and next year?
Absolutely. So there was already a huge shift in workers into freelance before the pandemic. That accelerated massively over the past year. And when you talk to people who just joined the freelance economy, 60% say they could not, there's no amount of money that you could pay them to go back to a full-time employment job. And I think, again, that speaks to this idea that people are really benefiting from a lot of the autonomy and flexibility that freelance careers have given them, as well as recognition that a lot of newer generations, particularly in the workforce, recognize that the traditional employment model is not all that it was cracked up to be. And they saw that during the 2007-2008 recession, work was not as secure as they thought being an employee. Now today, they've seen that again. And when we interview freelancers on our platform, they tell us that they actually feel more secure being a freelancer today than when they were doing full-time employee work going through a recession. And that's because on average, they have 4 clients. They have a steady set of people that they're working with, and they know that even if one of those clients stops a project or goes out of business, they can still keep earning as a freelancer. Whereas if they're a full-time employee, if they lose that job, they would be out in the cold. Maybe perceived to be, the reality is very different.
So take me to 5 or 10 years beyond the pandemic, when it is safely behind us. We've heard people like Mark Zuckerberg say, 50% of Facebook will be remote in a decade. But I guess I'm curious whether you think that will indeed happen, or if over time things are going to go back to the way they were once we've got this in the rear view mirror.
I think what we're going to see is 2 changes. So yes, workplaces like Facebook will indeed be much more remote, like Mark says. So that is true. I think what we will also see is companies will have a much different mix of employee and independent talent, because what we see with our customers is companies saying, wait a minute, why would I hire and limit myself to local talent and full-time employment talent when suddenly I can access a dynamic pool of people who are available to work for me through a freelance model, who have incredible skills that I need, who can be available at the drop of a hat, who can do small and large projects. Like, this is a very different model when it comes online and people are available at the flip of a switch, essentially. And by the way, this is deep work that they are building relationships with these clients and these freelancers where they're working together time in and time out over months and years. So the projects might sometimes be small or they might be big, but this is a different model. So it's going to be hybrid, remote, and freelance teams working together.
Okay. Upwork President and CEO Hayden Brown, thanks for sharing your view of the future